Patrick McNamara, Associate Professor of Neurology at Boston University and author of The Neuroscience of Religious Experience, said, "I get attacked by everyone. Atheists hate me because I'm saying religion has some basis in the brain, and fundamentalist Christians hate me because I'm saying religion is nothing but brain impulses." That was in the Telegraph, the English Telegraph newspaper, Friday, June 20th, 2014. There's a division of atheism within the scientific community, and its supporters appear to be at war with one another. One group, the most vocal, considers religion and spirituality to be little more than delusions, and seems to believe that a truly strong-minded person will have no need for spirituality. This view seems to be based on the idea that religion can be reduced to an echo of our dependence on our parents when we were very young. There's a correspondence between the internal working models of parents and God, and I quote, "The more attached we were to our parents, the closer we are to an illusory God later on in life. This leads to the conclusion that we call out to God in the same way we once called out to our parents. When we expected our parents to come to our aid when we were young, we created a habit that was then expressed differently later on. We set ourselves up to start expecting that our prayers will be, or should be, answered. We come to expect that someone has to help us when we're suffering. This view, that God is a reflection of our parents, seems to imply that if we could address our problems with positive coping styles, we wouldn't cry out, or perhaps we wouldn't need to cry out to an invisible God for help. We wouldn't look outside ourselves in moments of suffering. In other words, according to this view, belief in God is a kind of symptom of a nearly universal subclinical mental disorder. Subclinical means, for mental disorders, disorders that are faint enough or quiet enough that they don't send us to the clinic. This kind of atheism tells us that something is wrong with people who believe in God. This view, which we'll call the delusion model of spirituality, seems to be based on the idea that untruths are inherently damaging. Not surprisingly, it seems to be most popular among scientists who see themselves as bearers and defenders of truth. If real truth belongs only to science, then scientists are the most heroic people on planet Earth. Like many religions, this kind of atheism upholds its own faith, in this case, faith in the scientific community, as the sole source of the highest knowledge. The other type of atheism we'll look at here is the kind represented by Dr. Michael A. Persinger, to some extent, and myself. Dr. Persinger's God helmet provided evidence that religious and mystic experiences arise from specific brain functions. These functions are intrinsic to the brain's operation and are the result of our evolutionary history. This kind of atheism quietly rejects the delusion model and recognizes that we have not evolved to see the truth, but rather to survive. The psychological traits we show, the ones within the normal population, appear because they confer biological or social advantages, like staying alive and getting along with other people, including that cute girl sitting next to you in class. They help us to survive and achieve social success. Our evolutionary history has selected beliefs that encourage adaptive behaviors and discourage maladaptive behaviors, the destructive ones. These become less likely. Religion is perhaps the single most powerful cohesive force in human cultures, and culture is our survival strategy. We rely on one another for everything, including staying alive in the face of threats. This means that spiritual beliefs, religious beliefs, are intrinsic to human beings. Our minds may even be configured to avoid challenges to them. In our early evolutionary history, our thoughts and words had to be integrated with our religious beliefs. It didn't matter if these beliefs were true. Threats to our survival don't spare those who speak the truth. They are likely to spare those whose beliefs motivate them to behave adaptively and to act constructively. Human beliefs endured when they gave us a reason to do things that kept us alive. If you believe that there is a wrathful spirit in the soul of a tiger that lives in a nearby forest, you're more likely to stay away from it than if you think one tiger is like another and decide to hunt it for its skin. If there's no God and no great spirits If your ancestors cannot look down on you from above, then it's hard to see how there would be any sacred acts. Some acts are important, of course, but not sacred. If you believe that saving a baby from a hungry lion helps your people thrive and your nation survive, you'll act to save the baby. The tribe needs you to do that. If you also believe that the gods will be pleased with you, and the shaman will give you a blessing, and the people will stand around and the women will sing your name, you may try harder than you would if it were only a social reward. God will reward you for saving that baby. The people do the same. If it's nothing more, if the life of a baby is not somehow sacred, then you only get one kind of reward. If it is sacred, then you get two kinds, the ones from the gods and the ones from the people around you. If the gods tell you to share with others as a religious obligation, like the Islamic injunction to tithe 10% of your income, more sharing will go on, and fewer people will die of starvation or exposure. The population will grow just a little bit faster than otherwise, and so charity towards your fellow man or woman or child becomes a force for the survival of our species. We rely on one another as we raise our children, find food, protect each other, and obtain the pleasures of life. We need one another to feel good, so we work hard to impress people, because we want their friendship and respect. Belief in God, or the gods, allows the behaviors we need to live in complex cultures to be expressed openly in the context of religious codes, morals, ethics, and beliefs. We need to defend one another, so we accept gods who tell us to act with compassion and sympathy more easily than gods who tell us, "To thine own self be true." There are schools of philosophy and mysticism who uphold this as one of the principles of the art of living, but few popular religions. The gods counsel peace within a community, the tribe, the nation, or the people, whenever possible. Buddhism encourages us to look within. But the children in Buddhist Sunday school are more often told to practice compassion and loving kindness, to honor their parents, and to observe the precepts against lying, stealing, drunkenness, and committing adultery or rape. Most of the beliefs of this seemingly introspective religion are centered around rules for living with other people. The Hindu scripture, the laws of Manu, contains all sorts of laws for how people should relate to one another, like the duties of sons, how husbands and wives should treat each other, and as you'd expect, how people of different castes should relate, or not relate, with one another. Religion is not a way to know God, but rather, a priori, knowing God as the way to other people. The existence of God, or the lack of it, has nothing to do with it. If you go along with the common beliefs, you'll get along with most of the people around you, and that has heavy social rewards. At the dawn of our species, getting along with others was also a matter of survival. There's a survival of the fittest at work in the evolution of our religious beliefs, and that's why the beliefs we find in all or most religions have been so successful. The species we see around us are the survivors, the ones best adapted to their physical environments, and the most common human beliefs are the ones best adapted to living with other people, adapted to the cultural environment. No religion that regards birth and death as ordinary events can ever survive next to one that treats them as sacred. The profound changes in the lives of those whose loved one dies or to whom a child is born invite a larger-than-life interpretation. Our religious beliefs about these events see them as sacred, making it easier to encourage people to be emotionally sensitive around those affected by them. Everyone gives some space to those in grief and tries to avoid triggering conflicts during times when people are most emotional, during grief or celebrations. Religion is a projection of our evolutionary strategy, displayed on the screen of belief, and edited so that only its practical features appeared. Religious behavior overall reflects the principles that human cultures are based on, while religious beliefs make them easy to remember, pass on to others, and above all, to act on, even in the non-religious moments. Do you know the saying, form follows function? Usually it's applied in architecture. The shape of a building reflects what the building is used for. Religious forms follow cultural functions. When a truth has no function in a culture, it will tend not to be remembered by its people. It will become a worthless meme. A meme is a unit of imitated behavior, or a unit of imitation. This is a simple definition of the word, and for those who want to look into it more deeply, I cannot recommend anything better than the works of Richard Dawkins. Some religious ideas, such as those unique to metaphysics, may be preserved, but in most cases, true beliefs that don't guide behavior won't last, and false beliefs that do help us know how to behave constructively will be remembered and passed on. Since the invention of writing, and then later on printing, many worthless religious memes have been preserved. Teachings about Atlantis, Lemuria, or ideas like the quantum mechanical baby Jesus can be preserved and spread in a tiny minority of the population. Ideas like these probably wouldn't have survived for long in our early evolutionary history. In our own times, using quartz crystals as a means to attain enlightenment had its heyday from the 1980s to the 1990s and is rarely heard of today. Nevertheless, Google showed over 650,000 results for the phrase crystal healing in June of 2014. It showed over 2 million results for compassion and loving kindness, a classical Buddhist phrase. The internet preserved the doctrines about crystal healing, which few spiritual healers rely on anymore, and so the number of them remains high in spite of the fact that the idea has lost its popularity. Worthless memes do survive, even memes that may not be worthless but seem to have limited value, crystal healing being a case in point. Our evolutionary heritage has made it advantageous to believe in nonsense. Our eyes only see the section of the electromagnetic spectrum that helps us see threats and opportunities. That's visible light. There are many other frequencies, including things like gamma rays, infrared, ultraviolet, and so forth. We're blind to those sections of the electromagnetic spectrum, and those sections of the electromagnetic spectrum don't present us with tigers that want to eat us or foods that we can eat. Our eyes hear only in the range where sounds mean something to us, from 20 to 20,000 hertz or so. Our eyes and ears do not represent the world. They give us access only to the information we need. Our adaptive beliefs don't represent the world either. They give us access to the information we need about the cultures we live in and the people we live with. That process may be more efficient if we build our beliefs slowly, forgetting the ones that don't work and remembering the ones that do. Their truth, or lack of it, is not the trait being selected. And if a nonsensical idea works as the core of a set of religious beliefs, social beliefs, then it will be used, and its truth or falsehood will have nothing to do with it. So, there is no God. You're better off believing that there is, because it allows you a context in which to know how to relate not to God, but to the people around you. The beliefs that survive among humans are selected through survival of the fittest beliefs by means of cultural selection. The worthless memes that don't survive might be overly complicated, based on metaphors that are too obscure, simply incomprehensible to most people, or express a morality that's too different from ordinary experience, to name only a few of the problems with some of them. Since the written and the printed word appeared in our history, few unproductive ideas die out completely, but the vast majority of the population won't pay any attention to them. There are Hindu scriptures that delve into the metaphysics of creation and subtle energies like Prakriti and Prana, to name only two. Then another one, better known, is Kundalini, a force, a subtle energy that we carry in our bodies. Most Hindus are much more interested in prayer, devotional practices, and spiritual practices, like meditation, chanting, and reading the scriptures. The Hindu epics Mahabharata and Ramayana command huge audiences when they're made into television series, but nowhere near so many people are interested in the metaphysics of that religion. Hinduism's metaphysical memes are far from dead, but neither do they thrive the way the popular beliefs do. Metaphysics can make people feel they understand deeper truths, but the kind of religion most people practice, that most people want, helps them understand and live their daily lives. The Ten Commandments are useful guides to ordinary living, while the mysteries of the Kabbalah are harder to apply. And that's probably why they are so much less popular. The Sermon on the Mount, that tells us that blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, is quoted much more often than the somewhat mysterious Logos doctrine in the first verses of the Gospel according to John, that tell us, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." That's difficult to understand, and far fewer people try to understand than attempt to apply Jesus' more loving messages in their lives. One impossible concept can create context for many adaptive ones. The will of God can explain the inexplicable and create a basis for libraries of moral codes. Its ability to motivate adaptive behavior isn't diminished by the fact that the existence of God cannot be proven and that God may not exist at all. As a scientist, I do not believe in God, certainly not the way most Christians and Jews and Muslims and so forth believe in God, but I will still leave a little room for those who do. And say it again, the ability of a belief to motivate adaptive behavior isn't diminished by the fact that the existence of God can't be proven. The adaptive value of the behavior can be proven. Alice laughed. "There's no use trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." That's from Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. One of the main exponents of the delusion model is Richard Dawkins, whose book The God Delusion is one of the most influential works of active atheism in existence. He maintains that atheism is as worthy of respect and representation as any religion. Unfortunately, atheism, the belief that there's no God, is a religion based on rejecting religious ideas rather than embracing them. For most people, it's not at all clear that atheism is a religion. Above all, it lacks the indefinable mood, the ethos that appears in the beliefs and paraphernalia of all religion, the architecture, the art, the music. Most, if not all, religions encourage certain states or moods or states of consciousness: compassion, devotion, awareness, awestruck wonder, faith, mercy, kindness, equanimity, love, silence, the dream state, calm, joy, empathy, and receptivity, to name only a few. For atheism to become a religion, it would have to sanctify the discoveries of science, and that won't work, because scientific truth keeps changing. I also cannot help but stop and wonder that one of the principal adages of scientific method is that you can't prove a negative. And scientific atheists, whose beliefs are based on things that can be proven, begin with the recognition that there is no God, a negative statement, and by the rules of science, you cannot prove a negative. Atheism offers little basis for the classical religious and spiritual values. Although that may change as science acquires a deeper understanding of them, its religious ethos appears to be limited to 2 points. The first is the sense that, and I quote, "a proper understanding of the magnificence of the real world, while never becoming a religion, can fill the inspirational role that religion has historically and inadequately usurped." Now that's a quotation from Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. The second religious ethos of skeptical atheism is a rigorous adherence to truth as revealed by science. Unfortunately, Atheism has its fundamentalists, and like the religious kind, they actively oppose and even hate ideas they disagree with. Of course, not all scientific skeptical atheists hate religion. Most of them are merely critical. Not long ago, someone brought to my attention a group called guerrilla skeptics. These are people who write against pseudoscience on Wikipedia, including people in things like Deepak Chopra, alternative medicine, Rupert Sheldrake, neurolinguistic programming, and the cosmic pineal gland, to name only a few. Such people are not writing for their beliefs, but they write against those of others. Putting opposition to conflicting beliefs at the forefront is one of the hallmarks of fundamentalism. Perhaps the scientific worldview is so impoverished that it cannot be sustained without attacking those of others. More likely, aggressive skepticism appeals to those with aggressive personalities. The sense of awe at understanding or trying to grasp the sheer size and elegance of the universe and the mysterious fact that anything exists at all seems to be the only religious sentiment atheism can offer. With this in mind, we'll think of atheism as a school of philosophy and not a religion. In order to fully justify this decision, we'd have to create a set of criteria for what does and what doesn't define a religion. The problem is that religious believers and delusionalists, who see religious belief as nothing more than or just delusions, will both offer different criteria, and both will claim jurisdiction over the definition for the word. Traditional religion and mysticism encompasses a much broader range of spiritual states. For people who have experienced them, being overwhelmed with compassion, bliss, or moments of very deep calm, like the peace which passeth understanding, a phrase from T.S. Eliot. The inspiration the scientific worldview offers will always seem insipid. Carl Sagan expressed the ethos well in his TV series and book Cosmos, though like any other mood or ethos, it can't really be expressed in words. He told of how, as a child, he was amazed by the fact that the stars were suns, very far away. It imposed a sense of the sheer size of the universe on his young mind and filled him with a sense of profound curiosity. He also repeated a phrase that seemed designed to amaze his audience. Billions and billions. Numbers so large that the mind cannot grasp them. He evoked mind-bogglingly large spaces and numbers. Of course, having your mind boggled, which means to be astonished or overwhelmed when trying to imagine something, is one possible point of entry for spiritual faith, but it can also appear in response to scientific discoveries. Those who experience it may become convinced that learning science is the best way to the most fulfilling subjective experiences life has to offer. However, being astonished at the thought of the complexities of nature, the size of the universe, or the power of the mind in its attempts to come to grips with it is a sensation that came late in our evolutionary history. The confrontations that our early ancestors had with the mysterious were probably far more likely to motivate adaptive behavior. The birth of a child may not be very mysterious, especially to obstetricians, but our emotional responses to it leave us acting as though it's one of the most sacred experiences possible. The child lives, the mind boggles at it. It's not a miracle, but we respond as though it were. And so the phrase miracle of life is found in almost every language. Every mother becomes the Blessed Mother, and every newborn becomes like the infant Jesus. Now, to a person who's had an experience, a spiritual experience with a personal meaningfulness, like the kind that can happen during near-death experiences, or spiritual epiphanies, or deep in the depths of meditation, or in the rapture of prayer, or the kind where someone feels they have found their purpose in life, the sheer size of the universe means nothing. When a mother is handed her newborn baby for the first time and cries her joy, feeling that nothing could ever be so important as the infant in her arms, the fact that there are billions and billions of stars, organized into galaxies, galactic clusters, and even superclusters of galaxies becomes trivial. Nor can you tell her to be amazed at the seeming miraculous the seemingly miraculous biological complexity involved in conceiving a child and then giving birth. To her, the miracle is the love she feels, not the biological processes that stand behind it. To mention them in that moment could even be insulting. Complexity does not make something sacred, especially for those who express their sense of the sacred through prayer. Complexity and the beauty we find in it is an ethos. It's a mood. It may be spiritual, but it certainly does not define spirituality. The magnificence of the real world runs deeper for those who engage it through their spirituality. The way we feel about factual truth, whether it appears in science, law courts, or anywhere else, can't compete with the states of consciousness that appear in religion or mysticism. That's one of the reasons why religious belief have flourished throughout our evolutionary history. A mind in a state of silence brought on by meditation or the experience of being in God's presence is not going to be moved by large numbers, even Googleplexes, 10 times 10 times 100, or 10 to the 10th power to the 100th power. An atheist of the delusion school might argue that these experiences are based on delusions and that it's self-evident that truth is better. Of course, the whole idea of self-evident truth runs contrary to the mindset of science, as all assertions call for evidence. Such an atheist might also argue that believing only the truth can save you from, and this is a favorite skeptical atheist catchphrase, cognitive dissonance. Yes, religions, including atheism, offer salvation. The trouble with this view is that there isn't any such thing as scientific truth. The major scientific truths embodied in our dominant theories, like quantum mechanics, evolution, and relativity, are subject to change. New theories replace and alter older ones regularly, though the process isn't so obvious to the general public. Darwin's original theory has been challenged and amended by things like punctuational evolution, Baldwinian evolution, and the selfish gene model, again, the work of Richard Dawkins. All of these complement the older survival of the fittest view, but the picture of how biological evolution operates has changed considerably since Darwin's time. Naturally, anyone who believes in classical Darwinian evolution will experience cognitive dissonance when confronted by one of these newer and controversial amendments to the original theory of evolution. Some of them might even lash out at them. Truth is not enough. Spirituality and religious faith are based on feelings and sensations. These paraphrased words, repeated, are from Richard Dawkins. A proper understanding of the magnificence of the real world can fill the inspirational role religion has usurped. Anyone who has ever had a spiritual experience will know that these are the words of a person who's never had one. The sense of wonder that comes from magnificence in the real, meaning physical, world, usually includes a sense of meaningfulness, the feeling that its magnificence means something, that it's somehow important. Of course, this feeling is something we project onto the physical world. Neither a snail nor a star cluster perceives themselves as magnificent. They are what they are. The magnificence of the real world, in the sense that one has been saved by freedom from superstitious delusions, was the focus of another school of atheist thought, Soviet communism. There, we also heard hymns in praise of rivers, forests, and yes, factories and mines, in celebration of the magnificence of the world that surrounded them. Dawkins and Carl Sagan might have been amazed by different things in the real world than the Soviets celebrated, but when spiritual beliefs and religious sentiments are thought of as delusional, the only religious sentiments that remain are those of love of nature and pride in believing that one has been saved from superstition. The Soviets focused on their forests, rivers, and plains, while today's atheists are more likely to show you pictures of single-cell animals and images from the Hubble telescope. But both of them will tell you, though in different ways, that if your spiritual aspirations go past contemplating the wonders of the natural world, then something is wrong with your mind. Your beliefs are backward, and history will leave you behind. Interestingly, both skeptical atheists, modern skeptical atheists, and Communist Party anti-religionists actively agitate or agitated against religions, though today's atheists primarily do it online. And I would like to give my thanks to my colleague for pointing out the similarities between Soviet communist atheism and the kind we now find in today's radical skeptics. If I ever meet Dawkins, I would ask him, after expressing my honest admiration for his work on the selfish gene and the notion of memes, who religion usurped its inspirational role from. He implies that religion acquired its inspirational role unfairly, and that makes no sense to me. There was no one to steal it from in the early days of our species, when presumably it came into existence, at least as humans experience it. The idea that there are spiritual feelings beyond truth, or being amazed by the physical world, offers a challenge to the delusion model. If spirituality is based on delusion, then spiritual feelings become symptoms of a psychiatric disorder. Any feeling that seems to be an expression of spirituality, or that's acted out through spiritual behavior, automatically becomes a symptom, a sign of a pathology. If religion and spirituality are delusional, then religious people are in the grips of a psychiatric pathology. If God is a delusion, then the people who believe in him are at least a little crazy. The extraordinary claim that everyone but atheists are delusional abandons one scientific idea, that clinically normal people are, in fact, healthy. When normalcy includes an average degree of religious faith, atheism, especially the assertive kind, becomes abnormal and may not be so healthy. Mental health can, and usually does, include a certain amount of faith in things that are untrue. A touch of myth and faith can enrich people's lives. The person who lives without it may not be very happy among their fellow humans, though they might delight in their own company. Naturally, skeptics and atheists who believe in the delusion model try to discredit anything that implies that religious experiences are within the repertoire of normal human states of consciousness. This includes evidence from the God helmet. Skeptics try to explain religious experience brought on by drugs as temporary psychosis. They try to explain near-death experiences as brain malfunctions that happens when the brain stops working. Often, more spontaneous religious experiences are explained as epilepsy. When skeptics are confronted by the idea that religious experiences and faith are part of our survival strategy, they usually respond with silence. Most of them are more comfortable opposing religious beliefs based on religious sources. If spirituality is a part of our evolutionary heritage, then spiritual experiences are normal and should be expected in some part of the population. Skeptics and atheists are accustomed to responding to religion with arguments from evolutionary theory. They're not so used to responding to evolutionary arguments that see an adaptive role for religion. Because of its pivotal role in the debate between religious and science in the, what can I call it, the battle of creationism, skeptical atheists have come to see evolution as their territory. However, very few of today's more vocal atheists have any background in anthropology, and often fail to appreciate the role religion played in our early evolutionary history. I would go so far as to say that in the dawn of humanity, there was no difference between culture and religion. When a skeptical atheist talks about evolution, they're talking about biological evolution, in opposition to the belief that the biological world that surrounds us was created by God. They rarely take the next step in understanding evolution, or human evolution, and begin to look at the evolution of our species and the roles that belief and disbelief would have played. It's been argued that the propensity to hold religious beliefs is based on suggestibility. Because suggestibility is crucial for holding religious beliefs, and religion and spirituality are crucial parts of our cultures. It may be more useful to consider it as a skill rather than a trait. Like so many social skills, it can be applied without the person knowing they're doing it. Being able to believe in fictional ideas that both facilitate and motivate adaptive behavior, good, positive, constructive behavior, would have helped to raise a person's social rank earlier in our evolutionary history. The better they observed their religious morality and ethics, the more respect they would receive from the people around them. More recently, sharing the adaptive but untrue beliefs of one's group helps to be elected to government office. At least, it's not easy for atheists to be elected in most of the world. And many religious men have been elected to public office, especially in the USA, by touting family values, which usually means religious morality. If you lack suggestibility, you might well be more intelligent than most, but you would also be less imaginative. Above all, this seems to refer to visual imagination, seeing pictures in your mind, and even in the clouds. Seeing pictures in the clouds, by the way, is called pareidolia. A lack of imagination can alienate those who are very imaginative. Those who find the facts more interesting can seem a bit boring and flat to those who respond to things more emotionally or through their imagination, or allow themselves to be reminded of other unrelated things, or by looking for indirect associations that turn things into jokes, or finding romantic or spiritual connotations. Suggestibility draws you into jokes so that you can laugh at the punchline as much as it contributes to being superstitious. It's a skill that helps us interact with other people and keep a shorthand version of the rules of our culture in our minds within arm's reach at all times. Being suggestible helps you integrate yourself into the culture and the people around you. Being suggestible helps you accept what other people think as well as thinking for yourself, and so you fit into your culture. That helped us and everyone around us to survive in our early evolutionary history. One difference between the two schools of atheism, the delusional model and the evolutionary one, lies in the way they explain why people are not all equally spiritual, why we don't all have religious urges, and why some have religious and mystic experiences and others, that is, most people, don't. Understanding the adaptive role of religious belief is not enough. We also have to look at the role of mystic experiences in our evolution.